We are now recording for the Nelson and District Old Timers Picnic in Lakeside Park, Nelson, November, July the 30th, 1952. Here's Jim Robertson, the president of the Nelson and District Old Timers Association, to give you a greeting. Well, Jim, I believe you came to Nelson in January 1900. Is that right?
Yes.
A little louder, Jim.
Yes.
And you were one of the original skinners for the West Transfer Company?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you tell me some of the things that you did for them?
We drawed machinery out to the main Jenny.
And
up the Silver King.
You had a 4-horse team to the Silver King, did you?
Yes.
And you also hauled the machinery for the Nelson Bonington power plant? Did you use the horses down there?
Yes.
What did you do with the horses down there?
We hauled it up from the lakeside, or from the ferry up to the place where it is put in.
I see, Upper Bonington, and you hauled it into place with the horses, did you?
Yes, yes.
What ferry was that? Was it close to the Tagham Bridge?
No, it was about 3 miles from the ferry.
3 miles down the river?
Yeah.
I see.
Right across from the West Kootenay Power and Light Company.
Well,
right
that's fine. Oh, I see. You ferried it across the river right at the plant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the idea. Well, Jim, have you a message for the old-timers? Have you just a few words? Say how you've enjoyed the picnics and so on? How many have you been to?
Oh, I've been to every one of them since the old-timer started in Nelson.
And we hope you'll be at many more of them. And is there anything else you want to say?
I'd like to see a good crowd here today.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a very good crowd now, and I'm sure that they'll be pleased to hear your recording, and we'll play it back now and then again next picnic, and we hope to see you here then. That's all for now.
16 years.
And now we have Alfred G. Watson, who has lived at Winlaw and Appledale for a considerable number of years. When did you first come to the Kootenays, Mr. Watson?
Well, the Kootenays on the 12th of July, I landed at Slocan City, 1898. Do you want me to hold that?
No, it's okay. Only speak up pretty well, you see, and speak towards me here.
Yeah.
Where did you work in the early days?
At the Enterprise Mine and the Arlington and ground sluice for Leeds.
A miner, were you?
Yes.
A hard rock miner, is that it?
Yes.
I see. Machine mining. What were your favorite occupations? What sport did you go in for?
Oh, well, I always followed horse racing.
You did?
Of course,
I
yes.
hope profitably.
Well, I followed that in Alberta before I came over here.
What about hunting or fishing or anything like that?
Well, I'm not much of an angler. I don't hunt up the angles. I always liked a good goat or a deer up in the mountains.
I see.
And it always seemed to me there's much nicer views and that, because it's changing every 100 feet.
Certainly a nice country when you get up into the hills, isn't it?
It sure is.
Couldn't be any better than around the Kootenays, could it be?
Oh, no, I don't think. I think it's splendid.
Now, have you any message for the old-timers?
Well, I certainly wish them the very best of luck and joy, and keep living as long as possible. And I think we got a splendid, nice park here for everything, and I'd like to see big good big crowds come.
Well, that's fine.
Handle it, and
Well, we'll...
seems to me it could be handled to advantage. You got a splendid place here.
Yes. Well, that's fine, Mr. Watson, and we'll look for you coming back next year, and you'll hear your voice over the recording system next year.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I was here once before, but I'm too badly crippled up with arthritis.
Oh, I see. Well, that's too
Come
bad.
on much.
Oh, well, you keep, as you say, keep on living, and we'll see you next year.
Sure. Thank you very much.
To open the proceedings this afternoon with a short address of welcome. The gentleman that doesn't need any introduction from me. You all know him. His Worship, Mayor Shorthouse. Mayor Shorthouse? George.
Are these right, Ross? Are they set this right? Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy indeed to have this opportunity to extend on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of Nelson a very warm and hearty welcome to our visitors this afternoon. May I also express the appreciation of the citizens of Nelson to the Centennial Committee and to all of those who have given of their valuable time to make this affair this afternoon as delightful as we possibly can. It is because of your vision, ladies and gentlemen, you old-timers, you pioneers. It is because of your vision, your planning, your courage, and your contribution to create and develop this beautiful city of ours that we honor you today. And we owe to you a great debt of gratitude. I'm sure that it gives you a great feeling of pride and satisfaction to be here and view this very modern city which you have so ably pioneered. It is very heartwarming to see such an excellent attendance here this afternoon. I sincerely hope that you have a delightful afternoon and that you will all be back for many years to come to take part in this pleasing annual event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Shorthouse. The next gentleman I am going to introduce is the hard-working president of the Centennial Committee. He is going to officiate at the distribution of the honorary scrolls to the pioneers. Mr. Vic Owens.
Thanks, Rube. Fully prepared. I have all my notes today. I frequently come out without notes. But we are in Nelson very, very delighted indeed to take an active part in helping BC celebrate its birthday. More particularly so today, which has been set aside as Nelson's Pioneer Day, to honor, recognize, or shall I say declare our recognition in a decisive manner. Around 50 of our pioneers have been chosen for scrolls by the Old Timers Committee. They have been duly completed and as a tangible manner to show our appreciation for the efforts that have gone into their past years in establishing our community and to bring BC itself generally to the state of fruition that it is. I would therefore like to add my words of congratulations to that of His Worship the Mayor, to our pioneers, and to them continual joy and pleasure in the knowledge that they have performed their duty as citizens over the period of years in a very enviable manner to we, the younger generation. The scrolls were prepared in Victoria for services rendered, I believe, not necessarily in this particular location, but throughout the province of BC. So some names may be on here that were not here in 1858. My name might be on the list, but I wasn't here then either. In 1858 I sent. So I have pleasure in presenting scrolls to the old pioneers of Nelson District and BC, I believe. If someone will give me the scrolls, I'd be delighted to present them. Might be easier if, in calling out the names, if you would hold your hand up and save you walking all the way to receive the scroll, and we will have it delivered to you. You possibly might enjoy that much more so than coming up here. In the old days when the Indians did all the work, I see he's got the girls doing the work for him. Oh, good for you. They have been arranged approximately in alphabetical order, and the first name on the list is Mr. Boyd Affleck. Boyd. Mrs. Mabel Attry. Mrs. Mabel Attry. Oh, you're doing the next one, John. Mr. Albert Blackwell. Bert Blackwell. I'll shake boys after. Mrs. Florence K. Boyd. Can you take it away? Mrs. Mary E. Bradshaw.
She's in the hospital. I'll take that one.
Mr. George A. Brown. George Brown. Mrs. Elizabeth Carey. Mr. Ludger H. Choquette. Mr. T. G. Cummings. It's Con Cummins. Mrs. Annie Curry. Mrs. Edith Dill. Mrs. Edith Dill. Okay. Mrs. Mary A. Doolin. Or Dolan.
That's Mrs. Vignon.
Mrs. Vignon. Miss Enid Etter. Miss Enid Etter. Memories are failing mine. Mr. Ross W. G. Fleming.
Not here.
Not here. Nobody can. Mrs. Susan Gagnon. Gagnon. Mrs. Gretchen Gibson. Oh, here she is. She's going to walk up there. Mr. Arthur B. Gilker. I keep it up there. Mrs. Dorothy Hamilton. Mrs. Lily Hayden. Mrs. Pearl Horswill. Arthur Gilker has just arrived. Mrs. Sarah J. Hunter. Mr. Fred Irvine. Victoria. Mrs. Alva Kettlewell. Miss Winifred Kinahan. Mrs. Minnie E. Laughton. I've heard this man before, Mr. Rube McCandlish. Mrs. Pearl McLanders. Mrs. Mary H. McLean. John W. Mulholland. Mrs. Bertha A. Norcross. Mrs. Mary E. Noxon. Mrs. Mabel Peebles. Close relation, Mr. Robert A. Peebles. Bob Peebles. Mr. Frank Phillips. Mr. Frank Phillips. Mrs. Ruth Proudfoot. Mrs. Ruth Proudfoot. A close relation, Mr. David H. Proudfoot. Mrs. Elizabeth Radcliffe. Mrs. Elizabeth Radcliffe. Miss Edith M. Robertson. Mrs. Edith M. Robertson. Here she is. Mr. Hugh Robertson. Is he with you? Mr. Denis St. A.M. Sewell. Will you take it for her? Mr. Walter H. Smedley. Mrs. Olive M. Sutherland. Disappeared, I guess. Mrs. Maud Traves. Mrs. Ann Wallace. Clara May Waters. Mrs. Clara May Waters. Mr. Edmund C. Ragg. Eddie Ragg. My duty has been performed.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Mr. Owens thinks his duty has been performed, but it hasn't. I would like to request now that Mr. Owens and his committee would see that all the scrolls that were not picked up today are properly delivered. Will you do that, Vic? I asked if Mr. Owens has assured me that all the scrolls that were not picked up will be delivered. I'd like to thank him now for a job very well done. While we're on the thanking end of the proposition, I would like to thank the chairman of the Old Timers Committee, that is representing the Centennial body. I mean our old friend Johnny Lermont. Without him, I think we'd have been sunk. Johnny put in hours of very hard work in connection with this, and I think he's going to have hours more yet. However, Johnny, our sincere thanks to you. And there's another gentleman I would like to, at the present time, call for a hand for. That's our hard-working park superintendent, Frank Holt. Frank is always at bat. He's always ready and always willing to further anything for the civic good or for the good of any individual. And that's saying a whole big mouthful. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Ed Downey, the president of the Junior Chamber of Commerce, for arranging and handling the transportation of our guests from Mount St. Francis here today. Our sincere thanks to the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And while I'm on the job, I would like to thank Ross Fleming for the playback he gave us today of our previous recordings of the voices of the pioneers. If we can get to it later on in the program, we intend to make some more voice records. We're trying to set up a library of records of the voices of the old-timers, and the fact that in the 2 recordings we have played, we have already lost at least 10% will point up the urgency of having these people record their voices. It's something that if we don't record it now, we won't get it. I would like people to bear that in mind. And also, we're going to set up an old-timers register here in about 10 minutes. Anybody who has the necessary qualifications of an old-timer, I think that's 30 years residence, isn't it, Mr. Fleming? If you were 30 years or over, you're eligible to become a member of the Old Timers Association. That will cost you the princely sum of $1 a year. And I may say in passing that we need the money. However, whether you take a membership or not, we would like to have your signatures on the book before you leave the park. Later on in the evening, matter of fact, at 6:30, after the folks have finished their lunch, we're going to have a concert by the city band. The boys have very kindly consented to come down and play after I twisted their arm real hard for them. Our next speaker for the afternoon, our principal speaker, is a man who, like our good mayor, needs no introduction from me. He's a gentleman, I would like to point out, that has done an awful lot for the city of Nelson, and not to mention for the old-timers. For those who possibly don't know or don't pay any attention to such things, a matter of a few years ago, the question of the balance of the city water right on the Kootenay River came up for adjudication at the coast, the powers that be. This water had been used by the West Kootenay for a number of years, but by the ability and the persuasive eloquence of our Alderman Affleck, he was able to get the full amount that had originally allotted to the city of Nelson. And I can assure you that we can't get any more, so I think he really done something. Without any further preamble, I'd like to introduce Boyd Affleck, Alderman Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the advantages of being old is that one can say anything he pleases because nobody can do anything about it. You can't fire me, you can't do anything at all. So I'm just in the happy position of being able to say whatever I feel like. I notice that all the speakers so far have been using notes, but for me, I carry all my stuff right in my head. And I'll proceed to retail it to you, because there are a number of these things that I'm afraid I'd forget about in the excitement of the moment, so I'm going to read this, but nevertheless this is from my head, as you saw. Put this back here in the front. It is an honor and a pleasure to be invited by the Old Timers Association of Nelson District to address you and, through you, all our friends everywhere. on the subject of the nature, the objects, and the achievements, past, present, and prospective, of our association. Let no one suppose that our members are mere barnacles on the hull of the ship of state, slowing up its progress and adding nothing to its efficiency. Rather, they are like its ballast, not showy or noisy, but immensely valuable in steadying and safeguarding it in times of storm. Or like the flywheel of an engine, not in itself producing any power, but by its momentum carrying the enterprise steadily onward in spite of variations of the load. The tendency of youth is to look only forward, without too much concern for the causes which over the years have produced the present. The tendency of age is to look backward, reviewing and idealizing the good old days, and not exercising its thinking much on what lies ahead. Our organization seeks to achieve a useful combination of these viewpoints, and has succeeded in several recent occasions in being of definite and valuable service to our community. Let me describe only two of these. A couple of years ago, the Kootenay Lake General Hospital Association had a committee anxiously seeking a suitable site for its proposed new hospital. Some 15 sites had been proposed, none particularly suitable in all respects, but all quite costly. Several of the old-timers executive interposed at the critical moment when the decision had to be made, and pointed out the long-forgotten fact that by the terms of the original Crown grant, Jarrah Park was available for hospital as well as park purposes. And when the hospital committee realized this, its decision was immediately made. The new hospital will be an enduring monument to the wisdom of the old-timers and to their thrifty saving of around $50,000 of the taxpayers' money. Our most recent achievement was our determined and successful, though extremely costly, effort to save from destruction the John Huston Memorial Boulevard on the 400 block on Vernon Street, established by Bylaw 264 in August 1914, and occupied by the John Huston Memorial, the War Memorial, and 4 beautiful and historic trees. Through an oversight at the time the bylaw was passed, the concurrence of the Lieutenant Governor and Council was not obtained, and the Supreme Court judge before whom we brought our case ruled that because of this, the bylaw is of no force and effect, and that any council could destroy the boulevard at will. Our injunction and court action prevented this destruction from being carried out last year, but the Memorial Boulevard is still vulnerable and subject to any passing whims of any city council. We must press strongly to have the Lieutenant Governor and Council confirm Bylaw 264, preferably following a plebiscite of the electors at the next municipal election. Right here where we are is an instance of ill-considered destruction that the old-timers were powerless to prevent. You are missing today, and will long continue to miss, the gratefully cool high shade afforded by the great cottonwood trees which made the major summer attraction of this park after its bathing beach. These trees were in their prime, sound and healthy, but were slaughtered on the false claim that they were decaying and were a menace to life. The fact that only those trees within the park wall were destroyed, while the equally dangerous ones on the beach remain, is sufficient proof of the falsity of such reasoning. Since its last general meeting, the Old Timers Association has lost its president and its historian secretary, and the date and place of another general meeting will be announced today, at which a new staff of officers is to be elected and plans laid for continuing the association's activities. Among these activities, a foremost place will always be given to the recording and compiling of every form of history of the city and district, a continuing concern of the association since its beginning. In this connection, we are happy to note that our sister city of Caslow has succeeded in preserving high and dry the venerable stern wheeler, the SS Moyer, the only surviving complete example of an earlier transportation era now extinct. We invite all you who are qualified to become members of the Old Timers Association and to join with us in our enjoyable and non-arduous but well worthwhile activities. Your only qualification is a residence of 30 years in the city or district. We make no distinction as to sex, color or creed, but prefer those who have no jail record. Thank you.
The lapse in my thanks was caused by interviewing Mr. Fleming. We have decided for the next half hour to take voice recordings of any of the old-timers who wish to come up. That's open to anyone who has 30 years or more residence in the Kootenays. The older, the better we like them. So if you'll come forward to the table here, Mr. Fleming will make the records. I will do the interviewing unless somebody else wants to volunteer for the job. In passing, before we leave this end of the program, I'd like to thank Mrs. Lermont and her two little grandchildren for the help they gave Mr. Owens in distributing the scroll. Thank you.
Okay, Rube, go ahead.
Thanks, Ross. Okay, folks, here we go again. This is recording of Voices of the Old Timers for 1958. The first gentleman I'm going to interview this afternoon is Mr. Bill Oliver. Mr. Oliver, where were you born?
Oh, in a little town in Yorkshire. In Yorkshire, England.
Yeah. What year was that?
1864.
That makes you still quite a youngster.
94 years of age.
I wouldn't believe it to look at you. You could pass for 60 any day in the country. And that don't cost a cent either. Mr. Oliver, when did you first come to Canada?
1904.
1904. Did you come directly to British Columbia?
No, I went into Prince Albert in the Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan, yes.
But the next year, 1905, I came down here, going through to the coast.
Yes.
I had to stay a night here. And I looked around and I liked the look of the town. And they were saying in the paper that the Pilot Bay would be rolling steel rails in 2 years. They'd found a mountain of iron ore. So I thought, well, I've worked in the steel rail business for 19 years in England. I'll stop here a bit, have a look at it. And also I like the look of the town. And I got to know that there was a lot of big game hunting here, and I'm fond of that.
Yes, you have quite a reputation as a local Nimrod.
So I thought I'd stay on here, and I've been here ever since. 52 or 53 years.
Well, that's very nice, Mr. Oliver, and thank you very much for giving us this voice recording. And we'll see you down at the picnic next year and play it back to you. How will that suit you?
I will.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Well, I'll give you... What do you want to...
You get the secretary at the next table.
All right, Rube.
The next old-timer we're going to interview is Mr. R.J. White. Mr. White, where were you born?
Cornwall, England.
Oh, Cousin Jack.
Cousin Jack.
Well, well, well. They're a scarce article in the Kootenays now to what they used to be.
That's right, yes.
What year was that, Mr. White?
1888.
Oh, I got you beat 2 years. I was born in 86.
Mm-hmm.
When did you come to Canada?
1907.
1907.
Right to Nelson.
You came right to Nelson.
Yep.
You followed the mines like all good Cornishmen?
That's right.
I'd like to get you on here.
The old Bartlett house.
Yeah, the Bartlett house and the Grand Central
Yeah.
and so on. You still follow the mines, or have you retired?
No, I retired
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Well, you know, there's a lot of miners in the country, and there's only a few smart ones that knew when to retire. You apparently are one of them.
No, I got silicosis pretty bad.
Pardon?
I have silicosis pretty bad.
You don't show it.
No, I got full pension anyway.
Well, that's all to the good.
I'm just loaded.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. White, for this voice record. And if you come back next year, we'll play it over for you. Thank you. Thank you. I guess the next voice we're going to record is that of one of our youngsters. I mean to say a comparative youngster. A gentleman who is well known to everyone in the town and happens to be the treasurer of the Old Timers Association, which office he has held since time immemorial. This is Clyde Emory. Clyde, where were you born?
I was born in Winnipeg, 1894.
When did your family come west?
Well, my father came to Nelson 9 years before he started in business, which he started in 1898.
Well, that would make him in 1889, wouldn't it?
About then, yes.
That's
Came
right.
in before there was any railroad, and came in horseback from the
old Granite Trail.
over
from
Granite
Ward
Trail
Crossing.
from Ward Crossing. That's right.
Well, that sets him up as a real pioneer. We had one other person here still in town, Mrs. Mabel Jeff. She rode horseback from Tin Cup Rapids and from Ward's Crossing into Nelson when she was a 9-year-old girl, 1893. You have made your home here, Clyde.
Yes, I've lived here outside of the 3 years I was overseas, ever since we came to Nelson, carrying on the business that my father started, and my son is now carrying on, which will be the 3rd generation.
Well, that's really a record as far as the town goes. I think, matter of fact, that's the only 3rd generation family I know of in business, continuously, and I may say successfully. Have you anything further to add on your time in the city?
No,
Have you ever seen, you've been doing quite a bit of traveling, Clyde. Is there any place that you would rather live than Nelson, or any?
No, I've traveled around quite a extent the last few years, and I haven't seen a place yet that I liked as well as Nelson.
Good.
And that's what my father thought the first time he came in here on horseback, that if he ever started in business, Nelson would be the spot.
That's wonderful.
That's very, very nice, and thanks, Clyde, and thanks very much.
You should be an authority, because you certainly have traveled around quite a bit.
And if you'll be back here next year, which I know you will, we'll play this record over for you, and you can hear just how good you sound on the radio. As a matter of fact, you might go on TV.
Okay, Rube, the only reason I've been treasurer of the Old Timers, I guess, was when Dad died, they wished the job on me, and I've had it ever since.
He was treasurer before you.
Yeah, he was treasurer before
Well,
me.
there's nothing like keeping it in the family, is there?
Was he our first treasurer when we?
No, I think Widdowson was
Yes, I think that's right.
ahead of, yeah.
We organized in 1931.
Well, Widdowson was the first, and then my dad. And
Yeah. I knew he was there for quite a long
Yeah.
time. Well, that's
I've
fine.
at last got the books in shape. I gave the ones to Joy, and I never saw them again, but we're up to date now anyway.
Well, that's good. All right, Rube, here's Arthur Gilker.
The next I'll say that we're going to get a voice record of is none other than Arthur B. Gilker, one of our very young old-timers.
Here, here.
Where were you born, Art?
I was born right here in Nelson.
What year?
Now you're asking for things.
Well, it's facts.
Yes, December the 23rd, 1894.
That makes you
Be careful.
a ranking old-timer.
Be careful now.
Well, I didn't mean in years. I meant in the time he has resided in the city.
Another one of these pioneer business firms.
Yes, indeed. Yes. It's the business I'm with now was started by my father in 89.
Yes. Well, Mr. Emory, according to Clyde, came here the same year, so that makes 2 of them. And both practically in the same line of business.
Yes.
Well, they must have stood the battle well, because they're still in existence, both firms,
Yes.
both doing business at the old stand.
Yes. Pretty much the same location since 1889.
Now, have you any comment to make on the city as it is now and as it was when you first recollect it? I can recollect you as a very small boy myself.
No doubt, Rube. When I used to hang around the Victoria Hotel up in Victoria Street pretty much of my time.
Well, we kept Victoria Street pretty much in the family for a long number of years.
For long, yes.
I think you're the only one left living on it to that
Still
day.
living on Victoria Street, yes.
And no intention of leaving it. Or have you?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
One of these fair days, probably this fall, I might be leaving that area.
Oh, you're not going to leave the town?
No, no.
Oh, no. Well,
Oh,
that's,
no.
as long as we keep you in the town, that's the big thing.
This move is cheaper to move than pay rent, so they say.
Well, I don't know. They don't work out that way. I done a lot of moving in the course of about 40 years.
Yes, Rube. Yes.
Well, how do you think, Art, I'll ask you a personal question. This between ourselves, what do you think of the town today and as it was as you first remembered? What's the comparison?
Oh, it's certainly improved a whole lot, Rube. It's kept up with the times, and probably in some things it's ahead of the times. Although perhaps other cities are catching up to us, we were the first with a civic center of our proportions, and all other cities have caught up to us.
Well, if my recollection serves me right, we had the first civic center in Canada.
Yes, right. Yes.
The first one, I believe, just prior to that was in Bemidji, Minnesota.
That's right.
I think you'll find the records will prove that out.
I think you're quite right, Rube, yes. And from this, why other cities have set their pattern as far away as the Hawaiian Islands.
Well, thanks, Art,
You're very welcome.
for that voice record. You come back next year and we'll play it over for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Rube. Now here's Mrs. Horswill, and she's got a...
Now, you hold the mic, Pearl. I can talk louder than you can.
Okay.
This is Mrs. Al Horswill. When I first knew her, Pearl McGregor. I used to go to school with her, as a matter of fact. Mrs. Horswill, if it's not entirely too personal a question, where were you born?
West Selkirk, Manitoba.
I come from Manitoba myself, Brandon.
Oh?
You wouldn't mind telling me what year that was?
Oh, dear. 1890.
1890. Oh, I've still got you beat. You're still classed as one of the youngsters.
You went to school before me then, or afterwards? Which?
No, afterwards, yeah. I was 11, 12 years old before I got to go to school.
Oh, dear. That was bad.
No, I think it was good. I think I done very well.
They always say one's brain matures, you know, and you can take things in better.
I don't know. I think mine's declining. It's got to the mellow stage. When did you come to Nelson?
In 1895, July.
July 95.
When did you come to live in Fairview there?
Well, that's when we came to Fairview.
Oh, I see.
Well, that was when we first came to Nelson. We lived in Fairview, and then we moved uptown, and then afterwards I moved back to Fairview.
Oh, yeah.
I was married in Fairview.
In the Archambault house?
No, that's the big house over
You and
in...
Mr. St. Denis lived in the same house.
Yes, that's right.
You've been practically a continuous resident in Nelson then?
Well, I've never been very far for any length of
You've
time.
been in this district?
I've come to Nelson and left it 3 times, and I still love it.
You always come back. Well, that's something. You were married when?
January the 26th, 1910.
1910.
Getting a long, long
2
trail.
years before I was.
You're not so young after all, Lenny.
Pardon?
You're not so young
Oh,
after
I'm
all.
older than you are. I'll be 72 in December.
Oh, bad. I'll be 69 next week.
He's only a kid. I was 72 a year ago.
Yeah, he's got the edge on me.
Oh,
Incidentally, he got to town here about 6 months before I did too, so I rank as a tenderfoot along
that's
with
what's the
Rob.
matter with the town, eh?
Well, thanks a lot.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, thanks,
Get out.
Mrs. Horswill. If you'll come back next year, we'll play this over for you. We'll deal very kindly with you. And the next old-timer whose voice we're going to record is none other than Denis St. Where were you born, Mr. St. Denis?
Van Cleek Hill, Ontario.
And what year?
I was born on the 4th day of June, 1878.
1878. That makes you still quite a youngster, doesn't it?
80.
80? Well, I must say, Denny, in all sincerity, that you don't look it.
Thanks.
When did you come to Nelson?
Well, I think I'd rather start first and tell you that I first came to Nakusp.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
I came to Nakusp on the 8th of November, 1897. I remained there 6 years. And then I came to Slocan City. and I remained there until 1911, March the 15th, 1911, and then I moved to Nelson.
You were working for the Ontario Lumber Company in Slocan City.
Ontario Slocan Lumber Company.
Slocan. Well, I had it partly, right?
Yeah. At Nakusp, I was with the Peter Janelle and Company, who afterwards became the Yale Columbia Lumber Company Limited.
I remember the firm quite well. They had a mill here in Nelson one time.
Yeah.
Well, in the earlier days, you used to take a great interest in rifle shooting.
Yes, very much so.
I remember when Slocan City held the Dominion Salver. For how many years?
We didn't. What we did have, we never held the Dominion Salver.
Well, it is one of their district trophies, I mean.
Yeah, we put up when I belonged to the Rifle Association in Slocan City, we put up a shield for competition between Nelson and Slocan City. And Nelson came up, and they won it twice from us. Then I moved to Nelson, and we went up and we took it away from them. And
I remember, I was there that day.
We finally won the shield, and I've still got the shield.
You have? Well, now that is a trophy.
Yeah.
Sometime I hope that you'll turn that over to the archives of the Old Timers Association as a memento.
Well, I'll tell you what I had in mind. I have a lot of those souvenirs. For instance, I won the Dominion of Canada Salver in competition on the Nelson Range here.
What year was that?
That would be 1913.
Well, you were shooting against some very good talent at that time.
Yeah, but
there
then...
were a number of excellent rifle shots here then.
Yeah. Then I went down to Kamloops in 1914, and in competition with 82 of the best, supposedly best rifle shots in British Columbia, I won the BC Bronze Medal.
That's something.
Now I've got the Dominion of Canada Salver, I've got the BC Bronze Medal, and I've got this big shield. And I've got them all earmarked for certain of my kids, you understand?
Uh-huh. That is very, very nice.
All get something out of them.
That's something to treasure. Well, it's been very interesting interviewing you, Mr. St. Denis, and I thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you here at the picnic next year, and we'll play this back to you. Possibly there's a career open for you in TV. Thank you.
Rube, Denis St. Denis has something else to say to you.
Go ahead, Denny.
I just want to say that it was 62 years yesterday since Dave Proudfoot and I left Van Cleek Hill and came west to Manitoba.
Today?
Yesterday.
62 years.
Yes.
Well, that's one for the book, and you're both here today.
Yeah, we're
That's
both here today.
That's very, very nice.
We'll have to get Dave over here.
Thanks a lot, Denny.
We'll have to get Dave over here to confirm that, won't we?
Yes, you get Dave over here.
Yeah, sure.
I called him up yesterday. I used to call him up every year.
Well, Denis St. Denis just told us that you fellows came out together now. We want you to tell us the real facts.
The real facts are the same as we came out here in 1897. We left Bartlett Hill on the train.
That's right.
Well, that okay is what Denny said. That makes you out both to be really honest men.
Yeah.
The story tallies, anyway.
Yeah.
He's registered right there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Davey.
Yeah.
That's
Fine.
all right.
Yeah.
We want you right away too. Here.
But I didn't come for almost a year.
You didn't, eh?
The same year on...
but you came to BC in 1897.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, but...
Well, you tell him you come and meet you.
All right, which would you like to sit there or here?
Yeah, here.
There, right?
All right.
Right here.
That's right, Dave.
Yeah.
All right, Rube, here's Laughton.
You can go down to CTR Register today and see that.
Don't talk
We
until
have-
I ask you questions.
That's all right.
A change now. We're going to change of pace. We're going to interview a lady again.
All right.
One of our ranking young old-timers, Mrs. Minnie Laughton. Where were you born, Mrs. Laughton?
I was born in Kingston, Kent County, New Brunswick.
Oh, you're Bruno's.
Yes.
In what year?
1875.
1875. Well, that makes you quite a youngster.
Yes, I
When
am.
did you come to British Columbia?
I come to British 1897.
97. You got here a year before I did. Did you come directly to Nelson?
No. Come to Brandon first. Dad was on the railroad there,
Yes,
shipyard.
yes.
And we're married there. Then we came from there and we're shifted up to a place called Donald.
Yes, I know where Donald is.
And we stayed there for 2 years, pretty near. Then we're shifted to Revelstoke for the yard. He was on the yard there.
Yes.
And then we're shifted up to Nelson to the yard here.
Mhm.
And that was 1897, was it?
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
But
you've been
I didn't come until Christmas. Dad came first of the year.
You've been a continuous resident of Nelson ever since, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
Well, thanks very, very much, Mrs. Laughton, for
Well,
recording
it's nice
the
to
voice
see
for
you
us.
so healthy, Mrs. Laughton.
Oh,
You're looking,
I'm pretty.
looking
Not
swell.
very healthy. But I like to say I'm pretty weak, you know.
I think you're doing wonderfully.
I weigh only 67 pounds. So I can't fight much.
Well, you're like me.
I'm being robbed.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Touch him off. Well, thanks very, very much, Mrs.
Well, now we want to get Jack and Irene on here, too.
Oh, all right.
Well, I've had Nick over here for about... Well, all right. Come on, Irene.
Okay, well, I do.
You okay?
All right, go
We're
ahead.
going to interview another young lady, Miss Irene Laughton, the daughter of the lady who has just recorded her voice. Where were you born, Irene?
Brandon, Manitoba.
Brandon, same town as myself. What do you know?
Just finding these things out now, eh?
After all these years.
Yeah, after all these years.
When you came to Nelson, of course, with your parents? That would be
Yes, that's
97.
right. That's right. 1897.
Well, I've watched you grow up. I think I had a little bit of an edge on you in age. I can remember most of the Laughtons when they were very small. Jack here and Bobby.
Yeah, that's
Grace.
right. That's right.
And of course, I played for a number of years in the band with your dad.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
And I've known, well, the whole Laughton family for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You beat us here, I think, about the working part of a year. We came 60 years ago, 13th day of January.
Yeah, 1898. Eh? Yeah, that's right.
You've been a continuous resident of
Yes,
town
I
ever
have.
since?
Yeah.
Been one of these sweet hello girls.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's
Chief operator of
one of those,
BC Telephone
million-dollar
Company.
voices.
Yes, I was chief operator of the BC Telephone Company for 30 years. 30 years and 10 months. They say it's 40 years altogether.
You have retired.
I was just retired on April the 30th, 19...
Living on the fruits of your labor now, eh?
That's right. Yeah, I am retired.
Well, it's an awful nice stage to come to, isn't it?
Yes, certainly is. Enjoy the rest of my retirement.
Thanks, Irene. And if you come back next year, we'll play this over for you again.
It'll be good, I know.
Yeah. We're dealing wholesale now. We're dealing wholesale now.
Still dealing with the Laughtons.
Still dealing with the Laughtons.
Get my picture taken here.
Well,
What do you have, Rube?
if Art's camera survived the shot taken
It
to you,
will.
why, it's a
It
good
will.
one. Yeah.
I haven't broke a camera yet.
The next voice we're recording is that of another Laughton, Jack Laughton. Everybody knows Jack, one of our well-known optometrists, is that right?
That's right.
Boy,
That's right.
that's a million-dollar word without the pain. Where were you born, Jack?
Brandon, Manitoba.
Same place as me. It
You bet, I never knew that. You know
The
that?
plot
This is
thickens.
getting monotonous.
Yeah.
We're in a rut.
I really never knew that.
Where all
man.
the good folks
I've
come
known you
from,
for
Brandon.
60 years here, and I never knew that.
Did you get salt today?
I haven't seen him.
Well,
Oh.
naturally, you came with the rest of the family here.
Yeah, I
not-
come along with Ma
I
and
decided, well,
Pa.
that's awfully sweet of them to bring you. I don't know why they done it, but...
We've
gotta
down
have
in the
your
old
son.
Y down in the flats here when we first came.
Well, there's a lot of the pioneers
The
families.
Eppersons, you remember Epperson?
Yes.
Harry Epperson.
By the way,
Yeah.
I think Harry is the only Epperson that's left alive.
Is that so?
He was living in Portland. And he's the only surviving member of the original Anglican Boys Choir.
Oh, that's a...
Well, Jack, have you got any impressions that you'd like to give us on the town or its surroundings or any of the past history or anything like that? Just to make it interesting?
I don't know. We came here and we just dug in and got a lot of roots here and just stayed, that's all. And
We still have a picture of him playing the home marimbas anyway. And
Yeah.
well, that's one thing. With Art Gilker here, Art and I started an orchestra up in high school first of all. And drummer like yourself there, and old with Ross, I think too. We were used to play in the silent pictures, the orchestra. That's going back quite a while,
I done
eh?
a little of that myself.
I know you did. I was over in trail with Jimmy Pastor and all those fellas over there, too.
Well, I played with them fellas before you came there.
Yeah, I don't know that, though.
And then the New Liberty.
No, I think we have a wonderful place here. We always enjoyed it. We always come back to it, so it must be good.
That's fine. Well, thanks, Jack, for recording your voice for us. And like I promised the rest of the family, come back next year and we'll play it over for you.
All right, fine.
Thank you.
All right,
The next voice we're going to record is that of another old-timer, Ernest John Nicholls, commonly known as Nick. Where were you born, Jack?
It's Berkshire, England.
Berkshire?
Yep. Berkshire hog.
Black and white?
Black.
In what year?
In 1889.
89. Oh, you're only a youngster yet. 3 years younger than I am. When did you come to Canada, John?
1907.
1907.
In May 1907. I landed in Nelson the 24th of May.
24th of May. Well, that was an awful good day to land. On that particular day in 1907, I went to Caslo on an excursion boat with the Rocky Mountain Rangers, believe it or not.
Yeah, and that put the Kootenays on the Kootenay landing run, what I came down on.
Well, you went immediately into the steamboat service, didn't you?
Well, a couple of days after I landed here.
And you followed it until your retirement a couple of years ago?
Well, 4 years ago.
4 years ago?
Yeah.
I may say in passing that John retired and then, instead of going steamboat, he flew back to the old country on a visit.
Correct.
I'll take it from there now.
Well, I was on practically every boat the CPR had here.
On the inland lakes?
On the inland lakes, yeah. All but the diesel tug they got on the Okanagan Lake now on, but I served on all the others.
On all the others? Well, that's a record.
Started on the old Weimer.
Yes.
Firing. Yeah. When she was towing barges from Proctor to Kootenay Landing.
Did you ever work in the Nelson?
Yes. I was working in the shipyard here one time with Mr. Stevens. He was the superintendent engineer.
I remember him.
And Nelson was towing a barge from Proctor to Kootenay Landing, and the engineer wired in that he was sick. And I was sent out to relieve him, and I had a month on the old Nelson, and believe me, I'll never forget it. But what gets me now is no boats coming in, and you go up the North Shore here and see the old Queen of the Kootenays laying there in pieces. It's a pretty hard deal.
And the pilot house is a novelty shop on the beach.
Yeah, and my room is still there, what I had as engineer on.
Well, you ought to go up and lay claim to it, John. I wouldn't let him get away with anything like that.
Oh, I'll let him go to it.
Thank you very kindly. Well, I'll tell you.
Ask him if he knows his bells.
Johnny Lermont just asked me to ask you if you still knew your bells.
Well, I think so.
2 bells in the Engle, what's that?
Back up half speed.
He still knows them, John. He's still okay.
The last, since 1946, I was on Hanscom as engineer.
Yeah.
And we had the telegraphs there, which was quite a lot different.
Oh, yes.
The skipper would ring for a certain thing, and you could tell him where to go, but you answered him just the same. But well, he couldn't hear you, so we used to tell him lots of things.
I'll bet you did. You were working with Chess Brown, then?
Yes.
Where's Chess now?
He's up at Prince George. He's with the Inland Gas Company.
What, did he quit the water?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you know?
He's in charge of the...
I never knew that.
He's in charge of the pumping plant at Prince George. And in fact, he was down here, about 3 weeks or a month ago.
I'd like to see him.
I had a couple of days with him here, around town and out at Balfour. He still likes Balfour.
Oh, yes.
And he's got a very good job up where he is. He's boss up there. About 16, 17 men under him, I think.
Well, I'm glad to see him making good, because Jimmy's one of the best, one of the finest boys I ever met.
Yeah.
Next time you see him, you tell him that for me.
I write to him quite often.
Well, thanks for recording your voice for us, Jack.
Yeah.
And you make a date to be down here next year, and we'll play this over for you.
Wouldn't it be something to listen to?
Would it? Thank you.
The only thing I'm sorry for, I didn't keep a diary and put it in book form now about my day's steamboat.
Come on, here's Al Horswill. We can't let him get away.
No, we've been a long time chasing him. The next voice, folks, will be that of another one of our old-timers, Al Horswill, Jr. Where were you born, Al? Never mind the ice cream now. Tell us the
Kenora, Ontario.
Kenora, Ontario. And what year?
1887.
87. Oh, you're only a youngster. I was born a year before you. When did you come to the West?
1907.
To the Kootenays. Did you come directly to Nelson?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me, you know, that sticks out in my memory. I believe I remember when the Horswill family arrived here.
Mm-hmm. I guess you do.
I've had the pleasure of knowing them all. And like we were reminiscing a couple of years ago about the boats we used to take, or the trips we used to take on the excursion boats. At that time, Al said every time he went on an excursion boat, he lost a hard hat. That's what a man gets for wearing a hat like that anyway.
I only lost 3 on those boats.
Only 3? Well, that's enough. I'd hate to tell you how I lost some of mine. Well, you've made your home in and around the Kootenays virtually ever since, have you not?
Mostly.
Yeah. You lived...
Okanagan on the coast.
The Okanagan. Oh, well, we still get you back here every now and again so you won't get web-footed. At the present time, you're retired?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that just in last year, is it not?
The 1st of March this year.
1st of March this year.
Mm-hmm.
You were... the last position you held was village clerk, was it not? Castlegar?
Right. Clerk and treasurer of the municipality.
Well, when you stop and think back, say a matter of 15 years, there's been some change in Castlegar, hasn't there?
Plenty.
I can remember when there used to be a hotel, I think a 2-stall roundhouse for the CPR, and Tom Bloomer's house. That was Castlegar.
A little old school.
Yeah. Oh, yes, a little school.
1-room school.
Well, now, have you any comments you'd like to make on the difference between then and now?
Oh, yes, I saw him.
Well, I still like the old times and the old timers. The best.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I think that that's the consensus of opinion among the most of us who have lived long enough to become old timers. I think my august confrere here, Mr. Fleming, will agree with that heartily. I had the pleasure.
Nothing like the old timers.
No.
I had the pleasure of interviewing your good wife here a few minutes ago. I can remember her as a very small girl going to school.
Yes. I had a chap come in the store about...
You still have, what, 2 brothers living here in town, have you not?
3.
3?
Mm-hmm.
Huey?
Jack and Stan.
Oh, Huey, Jack and Stan, that's right.
I left here when I was 7 years old.
You know, it took you a long time, but you finally outnumbered the McCandlishes.
Have we?
Yeah. Our original family was 12 strong. There were just 2 of us left. My sister Maud and myself.
So we had quite a bit.
Yeah. They're gradually wearing us down.
No, time will tell.
It certainly does. Well, thanks very much, Al, for recording your voice for us. And like I promised all the others, if you'll be here next year, we'll play this over for you. Possibly you'll pick yourself out a career as a TV performer or something like that. Maybe we've given you $1 million start, you can't tell. You okay?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an extraordinary record. Taking back from the picnic last month, this morning I had the pleasure of bumping into a real old-timer, Bill Bartlett of Victoria. And I brought him up to see Ross Fleming, and Ross decided that we'd better put his voice on tape. So here we go. Go ahead. Bill, when did you first come to Nelson?
Oh, I would think that'd be, about 98 sometime, I think, 98. And it was the time the Bank of Montreal here was being built. My dad was plastering it.
Yes.
And we lived over here, what's Gyro Park now? It had just been, the cemetery had been cleaned out of there.
Yes.
And we lived just about 3 or 4 doors from Ross Fleming then. And the Blaneys and us become friends there, and we knocked around together quite a bit.
You were known as the Bogustown Bums.
The Bogustown, yeah. There was the hooligans, and I think Sid, he was the biggest hooligan of the bunch, really.
Well, that was a kind of a split decision. I wouldn't take it as best for
Well, we went up to this old Bogustown school way up the hill. I don't know why they built it up there.
Well, that is just a real estate promotion.
That's what I think, too, but the kids had a hard time climbing there. They didn't have buses those days. They had to do it on their own. That was mountain climbing.
Yes, there's not very many people know about that school is on the corner of View and High Street.
Uh-huh.
And it later became McLaughlin's Dairy, and has since disappeared.
Well, that Blaney family, who were well known around here, they were here for about 7 or 8 years, or probably longer. But Arnold is the only one left of the whole family there.
Was it Archie that was the...
There was Arthur and Jack. Jack went to the South African
Jack,
War.
and Fred.
Which one worked for the
Jack,
Hudson Bay?
That was Arthur. He worked for the Hudson Bay. Fred worked for the telegraph.
Yes.
Fred was an operator. Ernie used to work on the boats here. He was the steward. He afterwards became a diamond driller, and I met him down near Riverside in California one time. We hunted him up down there, and I saw Fred in Long Beach on the Pike. I saw Fred there, and he was taking off for New York at that time, and that's the last I saw Fred. He died in New York. And of course, there's Arnold and Sid and Reg. They were around Victoria for a long time, and we've always been like brothers, you know. They were 7 boys. 6 of them went overseas, and 6 of them came back.
Wow.
And my brother was over there, Ernie, and he was killed there.
Wow.
But we were just like we were a good bunch of sidekickers. He poisoned us down to even Victoria.
Well, when did you leave Nelson, Billy?
I think it would be about 1901. And Rube, if you can ever remember this, and it's funny how things do strike you. You came down. We stayed at your place while Dad was doing the high school.
Yeah.
And you came down to the depot when we took off, and you gave me a magazine to read, which was an Argosy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can remember that, so it's just as plain as if it was yesterday.
Argosy is not in operation now.
No, that one went out. But I mean, I remember you gave me a copy there, and that was when we took off on the train. We had been working on the Arrow Lakes. We did a hotel there for Mike Grady at the St. Leon Springs. And I used to row up to the Halcyon once a week for mail.
Yes.
And an old flat bottom boat where the oars was too long for it, you know. I had some tough trips there, you know, for a kid that was about 13 years old.
I'll say you did.
They get rough there, you know, and
you were working.
I got scared sometimes there.
You was working as a full-fledged plasterer when you were 12, 13 years old.
No, I had started in there about that time. My own fault, I guess.
You were doing a man's work.
I sort of played hooky and that. Dad didn't go for that. He thought if he put me to work, I'd get fed up with that and go back to school, but I guess I didn't do it. Didn't have any brains or something.
Well, you seem to get along pretty well.
But I liked Nelson. I've always had a soft spot in it, and it took me over 50 years to get back here. About 7 years ago, I think my son and I came through, and we spent a day or two here. But I get a kick going over the old haunts, but you've changed things so much around here, it's hard for me to place them, you know. And so Rube and I even been looking around this morning, and he's been telling me this was old Billy Hancock's brickyard, and the Old Grove Hotel was there, and we used to play around that 10-mile point. We had fun. And this was a swamp all around here as far as I remember. That's
right.
And I can remember the going along below where we lived there, up that road, the brick wagons in the winter time, they'd get stuck in the clay there, and they'd take two or three teams. Why they never put a few loads of gravel in there and filled in that mud hole, I'll never know.
I didn't think of that.
No, they
and then Stevenson used to live down on the corner there, and old Al Williams, we used to call him Turkey.
Turkey, yeah.
Turkey died a few years ago. He got something out of the estate here when it was settled. He came up here, but that didn't last him long. Turkey could never take care of 4 bits. No.
His dad was George Williams, the carpenter, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know who he's. I didn't know him that good, excepting that he lived with his stepfather or something there. Stevenson, wasn't it? Right on the corner there, it was kind of in a hole.
Yeah.
And the old sampling mill there that was built there, never used. I guess somebody's pipe dream.
Wasn't Stevenson the tinsmith?
No, I don't know. He was a pretty old fellow, and I think he used to beat Al up pretty good.
That's all.
He was a tinsmith.
Yes, I think he used to beat Al up pretty good.
There was a tinsmith right down on the beach, right below
there was a
where
trestle.
the Zeros is now.
Yeah, there was a trestle there now that's filled in. There was a trestle there.
Yes, well, he used to have scrap tin just thrown out on the beach, any old place.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Seemed awfully careless.
Yeah, crude.
I don't know whether there's any sign of that now. I haven't.
No, I was down there this morning, right to the dead end, and looking over there where his kids used to play, you know. I get a big kick out of it.
Oh, sure.
And I think there's a wonderful bridge here. I just can't help but imagine what
Yes,
that
that's
was
what it
years ago, and that's a real bridge. And traffic, I never see anything like it here, you know. For the size of this town, I think there's more traffic in proportion to any place I've been in.
Yeah.
And I lived in Los Angeles for 13 years. And there's lots of traffic down there, of course.
All right.
But,
Well, you
A
know,
lot of
Bill,
people live across the lake now, you see.
yeah.
the government has been promising this bridge at Nelson since January 1902, to my knowledge. I have definite proof of that. They finally got it built here a couple of years ago.
They've been using it
It
as
took a long time.
political bait for a long time.
Yeah.
Honest John Oliver promised it, but he wasn't very honest about it.
Oh, yeah. The thing is to get in, and when you're in, why, stay in. The
Yeah.
more and bigger and better promises.
Well, you see, in the early days, there was no road at all.
Mhm.
And we had to depend on rowboats or the steamers to
Oh, that's all there was
even
in
to
my
go
day.
fishing at 6 Mile.
Yeah. And the Kootenays, the redfish, we used to gaff them down there. How
It's
about
illegal.
that?
It's illegal now. You can't,
can't
they're
take 'em
protected.
anymore.
Can't
No.
take them.
They figured, of course, that those were a salmon, weren't they? Kind of of a sockeye.
Yeah.
And
I
you see the potlatch they're having down my way with the sockeye this year. Boy, the fishermen there, they got better than gold mine.
I saw the first redfish starting in Kootenay Creek about a month ago.
Yeah.
Going up down
Well,
the bottom.
they're headed up the Fraser
They
now
seem to be
for
a
'em.
sort of a silver trout
They are.
to begin with.
They are the silver trout.
Yeah, and we used to be fishing down on the old city wharf, you know.
Yeah.
We'd catch the silver trout before the redfish started to run.
I remember once when these Blaney kids, you know, we found a tub of butter. There was, I guess, it belonged off one of the boats, and we had a butter fight down on the dock down there. And gee, when the boats come in, there was butter melting all over the dock. You never see such a mess around there. You know, that was pretty reckless for a bunch of kids, but that was a real butter fight. Another time we
What was it,
found a
just
case
a-
of eggs down at 1 mile, and that was a bad fight too, when we were
Oh.
throwing eggs at each other.
So there were pretty tough kids in those days as well as now, eh?
Oh, there was stuff. They had gangsters then too.
Sure.
You know, they could duck about delinquents. Yeah.
People always think that the present generation
Oh,
is the worst, but
I can't just say that. They were bad enough those days, you know.
yes, there were some pretty tough guys.
Sure enough.
I always remember the Markey boys. You know, they lived right next door here, and boy, they used to have some pretty tough fights among themselves. They'd chase one another around that yard with throwing stones.
Oh yeah.
And well, they all turned out fine, you know, afterwards. But boy,
Yeah.
they and the Chapman kids up here, they sure appeared to be tough at the beginning.
Tell you, I was sorry to hear. I was really going to make an endeavor to find the Ernie Kinahan, you know, because we lived at that time right back with the upper and lower duplex there. The house belonged to, they used to run the Club Hotel. What was his name? No, not Curran. Curran's sidekicker then. Club or Chubb was it?
I don't remember.
Well,
I
anyhow,
remember the
that's
Curran.
where we lived in the lower part of that.
I know the
and,
house all right, yeah.
Kinloch was across the street. I was sorry to hear he passed. I would really like to have seen him, you know.
Well, the Kinahan boys are around.
I see this. I guess some of the families still living in the same house they did then.
Oh, yes,
that's the
sisters
family
live
home
there.
yet.
I've
the
moved.
sisters
I've
there.
moved 40 times
That's
since
the
then.
Kinahan home. Yeah.
I moved 10 times in Los Angeles in 13 years. You
That's
know,
all?
because well, I mean, we'd get a job was good for 6 or 7 months, and they or 3 months even, and it was so much time driving that I would just. And there was no trouble to get a place.
No.
I'd just move around closer to where the work was. It'd save a lot of driving time.
Kinahans have been there. I guess
Well,
I
their
think they
roots-
came about 1896.
Their roots are really in deep.
Well, we've been on this spot here since 1900.
You have.
Yeah.
I remember your dad, yeah. And my old school teacher up here, Clayton, he was Clayton, and Miss Scanlon at the other school, Miss Scanlon. Kate Scanlon, and she taught school down in Victoria there, and I'm always kicking myself that I didn't hunt her up there one time.
She was
teaching
head of the teachers' college there when she died.
She was a great old girl with Kate
She
Scanlon.
came back a few
wonderful
times. She
teacher.
went up on the mountaineering excursion, about 1924.
I was here, you know, when when they first started the streetcars. I see them come off of the flat cars right down here below where we lived there, you know. That's where they unloaded them.
Well, that was one of the reasons why we got down here. We started business the same year as the streetcars started, 1900.
Oh, and I remember one of them
run
run away.
The Grove Hotel.
That's
at
right.
That time.
And then they went up the hill here and down to the
They wanted
park.
to make more traffic, so they created a park where the Glacier Mills is now, and then extended the streetcars down to the park, to the shipyard, and that was to make more business.
I remember there was a little French Canadian there, was the Shorty, we used to call him. He was the shipyard boss down there in those days, you know. He kicked us out of the yard. Well, we led him a dog's life. We would have shots at him with slingshots, you know, from behind the lumber pile, and we really led him a dog's life. We used to call him Shorty. He was. It could be, but I remember he chased Arnold one time. Arnold started running down one of the skids that was greased, and he couldn't stop it with his clothes on and everything. Well, I thought I thought Shorty would split a gasket there, you know. Arnold turning flips, and he landed on his neck in the water. Of course, he was a good swimmer, didn't mean anything, but it was the funniest thing you ever saw, these arms and legs going in all directions.
Jack Curran is still living in the same place. He was one of the old shipyard workers.
Well, Joe Curran,
shipyard foreman.
Joe Curran was running a woolen mills in Vancouver for Vermicellis Silk Company or something. At any rate, I saw him once in Vancouver, but it's a long time ago now. I don't know where he is or what happened.
I haven't seen Joe now in 15 years, the last time he was up here.
Jack, you know, was present at the driving of the last spike on the at Donald or Craigmire.
Oh.
What do they call that?
Craigmile.
Craigmile?
No, Craigalachi.
In the Hale family, I remember they were great friends of mine, at least my folks, before we came up here. They knew the Hales in Victoria, you know.
They both go there.
They had the boats here, yeah.
We lived right beside them.
I saw George. I was running a job for the Spencer building in Vancouver in 1921. 1920, I guess it was, and George Hale patted me on the back there. I was on the street, and he says, "Billy Bartlett."
Yeah.
I says, "Yeah." And right away to it, I says, "George Hale." Well, he'd been running shipyards across on the North Vancouver side. He'd been a big shot in the shipyards over there. And
I
then
used to rent boats from him quite often.
yeah, well, I did
Bill,
too.
if you're going
I'm
to
get
that
missing
car
my
here,
family here.
you
They'll
better
be,
ring this off.
they'll be wondering what's happened to the
Well,
old
Bill,
boy.
it's been a great pleasure recording your voice, and we'll
Well,
have it
it's,
on tape here in the archives of the old timers.
It's very nice to be
the
able
end.
to see you fellas again. I really often think about you up here, you know, and you still have a standing invitation to come down and call on me in Victoria. We can show you around in a good time. I got a nice waterfront there on the gorge.
The first time we get a chance, we'll just do that.
You do
And
that,
thanks,
and that's fine.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
That's fine seeing
If you
you.
come back next year, we'll play this recording over for you.
Yeah, listen, I might just, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind having my folks come along here, meet you, and play this back for them.
Well,
Would you do
that's
that?
an idea.
Well, that's a good.
idea.
That's something.
Come right ahead.
And